Could a simple overtaking maneuver trigger the FIA's biggest credibility crisis in recent years? What happened in Brazil with Piastri not only changed a race, it could change the entire F1. It all started with a latent tension that had already been perceived the day before. The Interlagos circuit in São Paulo is known for its history, its changing climate, and above all for the aggressiveness it demands in each corner. In the 2025 edition of the Brazilian Grand Prix, that aggressiveness became the protagonist, marking one of the most controversial moments of the entire season. The race had been briefly neutralized after an accident involving Gabriel Bortolito, the young Brazilian driver who, with the pressure of racing at home and the adrenaline of the moment, made a mistake that ended with his car getting stuck in the tire protection. With the safety car on the track, the drivers regrouped, knowing that the relaunch would be key in a race that was shaping up to be strategic and tense. It was at that moment where the perfect storm brewed. Oscar Piastri, starting from 4th position in his McLaren MCL 39, had made a solid start, staying close to the leading group of Lando, Norris, George Russell and Kimi Antonelli. On the restart, he took advantage with millimeter precision of the slipstream of Antonelli's Mercedes, who took a few tenths more to react. Piastri saw the gap on the inside, a space that under normal conditions would be enough to launch an aggressive but feasible overtake. But what seemed like a masterstroke turned into a moment of disaster. As Piastri darted around the inside, Charles Leclerc, who was right behind, chose the outside of turn 1 to look for the same opportunity. 3 cars entering a narrow double apex curve at one of the most conflictive points on the track was a recipe for chaos. The move was calculated, but the line between brilliant and reckless in Formula 1 is blurry. Piastri braked late, trying to maximize the attack, and in the process blocked his left front tire. That millisecond where he lost total control of the car was enough to completely alter the trajectory. His car hit the side of Antonelli's Mercedes, pushing it into the path of Leclerc, who had no room to avoid contact. Leclerc's Ferrari, hit violently by Antonelli's rear suspension, suffered an immediate structural fracture to the left front wheel. The result was devastating. The car was disabled, with the wheel misaligned and the chassis compromised. Leclerc had to abandon at that moment, parking his car against the barriers while he watched in disbelief the outcome of an incident that he had not caused, but that left him out of the competition. Meanwhile, both Antonelli and Piastri managed to remain on the track apparently without visible damage, but the seeds of controversy had already been sown. The FIA activated the virtual safety car procedure while stewards began reviewing telemetry, onboard cameras and braking data. What initially seemed like a racing incident was quickly transformed into a case study that would expose one of the biggest regulatory cracks in the category. The public in the stands at Interlagos, witness to an unexpected drama, reacted with a mixture of silence and confusion. The replays showed diverse angles of the action, each raising more questions than answers. Was there enough space? Was Piastri too optimistic? Could Antonelli have left more margin? And most importantly, what would be the verdict of the commissioners? This moment, seemingly a simple restart, changed the narrative of the championship. In a matter of seconds, it went from being a bold maneuver to becoming an emblematic case about the invisible line that separates the competitive spirit from regulatory punishment. It wasn't just about Piastri, Antonelli or Leclerc. It was a mirror of the dilemmas facing modern F1, how to preserve spectacularity without falling into excessive judicialization of each maneuver. That turn 1, that braking, that tire lockup, and that impact were just the beginning of something much bigger. And the entire paddock knew it. The moment the FIA announced the 10-second penalty against Oscar Piastri seemed to light a fuse that had been silently building tension for some time. It was evident that the incident had multiple readings, but what was most surprising was the forcefulness of the verdict. Totally guilty for not having carried out the overtake in a controlled manner. That phrase, loaded with technical and ethical judgment, not only affected the Australian, but also opened a crack in the trust of the entire paddock towards the criteria of the stewards. The technical text that was used to support the penalty said, in essence, that for a driver to be able to overtake on the inside of a curve, he must have his front axle aligned at least with the rival car's rearview mirror before the apex point. The FIA determined that Piastri did not comply with that minimum overlap at the critical instant of the apex. According to the data they reviewed, although the McLaren had gained some space inside, the brake lock revealed a loss of control that invalidated the maneuver from a regulatory point of view. That is to say, although his car was in position, the fact that it blocked meant that he did not have complete control of the vehicle, as required by the regulatory text. For the stewards, that was enough to declare that the Australian did not execute the overtake safely. The problem, however, was not the letter of the regulation, but its interpretation. The question that immediately arose was, how many times in recent years have similar overtakes been seen without penalty? Extreme maneuvers, including tire locks, are part of the very essence of wheel-to-wheel competition. This is not a catastrophic error, but a symptom that the pilot is pushing as much as possible within the limits. Criminalizing that kind of behavior raises a philosophical question. What kind of racing does the FIA want? A discipline where aggressiveness is punished, or one that understands it as part of the nature of the sport? Furthermore, telemetry data showed that Piastri not only reacted to seeing Antonelli not giving up space, but also attempted to slow down significantly. The block was not the product of a gross error, but rather a split-second decision to avoid a major impact. This nuance was completely ignored in the official analysis. The general perception among the engineers, teams and drivers was that Piastri was penalized more for the outcome of the incident, abandoning a Ferrari, than for the maneuver itself. And this is where the regulation begins to show its structural weaknesses. A technical regulation that does not allow nuances, that does not evaluate intentionality, and that applies the norm with absolute rigidity, ends up being an instrument of repression instead of regulation. Races become slow-motion trials, where any action that involves risk can be interpreted as negligence. The FIA's argument that the sanction was consistent with previous decisions was also harshly questioned. Many journalists and analysts brought up similar incidents that occurred at circuits such as Silverstone, Austria, or Japan in the last 2 seasons, where sanctions were non-existent or much lighter. The lack of a common criterion, together with the feeling that certain maneuvers are sanctioned based on media impact, erodes the credibility of the organization. Thus, what began as a technical interpretation ended up generating an ethical and political earthquake. The drivers began to wonder aloud if they can still trust the margins to take risks, if it is worth attempting an overtake knowing that any millimeter error could cost them not only the position, but points, licenses, or even a suspension from the race. And when the fear of punishment overcomes the desire to compete, the sport loses. As soon as Piastri's penalty became official, the atmosphere in the paddock changed completely. What was an already tense atmosphere due to the close fight in the championship became a pressure cooker that finally exploded. The faces in the garages, the statements on the microphones, and the closed-door meetings left no room for doubt. The drivers were furious. But this time it was not a simple individual complaint, but the beginning of a collective rebellion, a united front that had not been seen in years. The first voice to rise was, ironically, that of Charles Leclerc himself, the pilot who had lost the most due to the incident. His Ferrari was knocked out due to damage sustained in the collision, and yet, in a gesture of sporting integrity that surprised many, he publicly defended Piastri. "I don't think Oscar deserved a penalty like that. It was a racing incident, the 3 of us were fighting for position, and we all took risks at that point," he said to the media, without hiding his annoyance with the stewards. Leclerc, normally measured in his words, was only the first. Pilots from different generations and teams followed him. George Russell, head of the Drivers' Association, was more direct. "The inconsistency in decisions is destroying the trust we have in the FIA. We don't know what is legal and what is not. They tell us we can fight, but then they punish us for trying." Fernando Alonso, with his usual ironic tone, dropped a media bomb. "Maybe they should put cones on the curves and tell us where to go to avoid penalties. That way we don't even call it a race anymore." His words circulated like wildfire on social networks and caused chain reactions. Even Max Verstappen, known for his aggressive style and history of extreme maneuvers, criticized the interpretation of the regulations. "With this rule, half of my overtaking in recent years would be illegal. It's ridiculous," he said dryly. The most alarming thing for the FIA was that the indignation did not stop only at the microphones. That same night, in an emergency meeting between several pilots and team representatives, the possibility of formally demanding a review of the 2025 driving guidelines was raised for the first time. The proposal included a collective demand to include an active voice of the pilots in the interpretation of controversial maneuvers, and that the internal evaluation processes be reviewed with clearer, more open criteria and with the possibility of immediate appeal. The 10-second penalty, beyond its impact on the race classification, triggered a deep crisis of confidence. A warning sign for an entire generation of drivers who no longer know for sure if they can trust that their decisions behind the wheel will be judged fairly. Because if an aggressive overtake, executed with skill and precision although not perfect, is penalized with the same severity as flagrant recklessness, then the message that is sent is devastating. Do not risk, do not fight, do not compete. And now I ask you directly, do you think Piastri's penalty was fair, Or are we seeing the birth of an F1 where control kills competition? Let me know in the comments what you think of all this.